Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
How's
Are
everybody doing?
you cold today, Charles?
Pardon?
Are you cold today?
Yeah, it's a little chilly up here.
Oh,
I'm sitting in front of these big glass windows and, it's like the cold air just kind of comes right through them.
yeah.
So it gets just a wee nippy bit chilly up here. Sometimes.
It keeps you awake though, doesn't it?
Cold.
It does. It does. But that's what hot coffee is for too.
Well, that's true too.
You can wrap your hands around the mug, keep them all warm, while you're sitting there thinking about what you're going to do next. So, and that seems to be the big part of it, is just kind of figuring out what you're going to do next. So you spend a lot of time with your, with your hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. So, lady, that's quite the image there.
Good morning, Charles. How are you?
I'm okay. You look quite festive.
Yeah, that was my Mardi Gras costume a few years ago work.
I thought it might be. I know we miss going out and stuff, but it's kind of like dressing up to the extreme.
Yeah, it was. I was the Mardi Gras bird princess that year.
Yeah. Just the feathers and the mask. That's quite, that's something else.
Well, thank you very much.
Wow.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. So did you make that mask and things, or did you?
I actually purchased those masks from the Dollar Tree, but I made the feather boa is something I made. Is actually a wreath. It was a styrofoam wreath that I wrapped purple, gold, and green feathers around and took it off the door and hung it around my neck on Mardi Gras Day.
There you go. Wow.
Oh yeah.
It makes a nice photo.
Yeah, I enjoy it. I like wearing masks. I don't know why. Maybe I was a raccoon in a previous life. I'm not sure.
We could have a whole long discussion about that.
What, being a raccoon in a previous life?
About masks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and their relevance in art, because mask making goes back to probably 20, 30,000 years.
Yes.
So it's something that people have done for a long time, and it's it's kind of interesting. You put on a mask and you take on a different persona.
Yes, you do.
Mm-hmm. So it's something that's deeply ingrained in we humans, and I would go so far to say, and I've done a lot of work with a men's group, and I would say that most of us go through life wearing a mask, whether we actually have one on or not.
Yeah, now you're getting deep, Charles. Now you're getting deep.
Mm-hmm.
It's too early.
Oh, okay. You hadn't had enough coffee for that one yet. Okay.
Yeah, I'm still drinking coffee just like everybody else. It's too deep.
Wow, I love that math lady.
I know.
Thank
And the feathers around it, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Bernice. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, let's get rocking and rolling, because it is now 10:01. Okay, and so let's get this thing underway. Today, as I had promised, lady, I got out some acrylics, and I did a little work in acrylic, and basically documented it. And so I'm going to take you through the steps. I'm going to show you the two paintings that I did.
Okay.
First. And then we'll kind of go from there. Okay. There we go. All right. Everybody see that?
Yes.
There should be two paintings kind of stacked on top of each other, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we see them.
Yes.
Okay. So, so I did those. Well, one I really did yesterday, and the other I did this morning when I got up. And
Don't hurt our feeling now, really.
well, okay, I won't. Again, these are kind of little experiments. They're not real large. I would say the one on the bottom is about a 12 by 12.
Okay.
Okay.
Inch, and it's on what we call a wooden cradle, and I'll kind of walk you through the process with that and show you all of that. But that was kind of like the end result, which, by the way, is not really finished. I still want to go back and play with it some more, but I thought it was a good start, and it gave me something to basically walk you guys through and give you some ideas about how you can manipulate and play with acrylic paint. Okay. So we're gonna get on. I think I'll do the one. Yeah, I think I'll do the one on the bottom first, and then we'll do the one on the top. So. So you should be looking at, if I'm on the right place.
Green.
Yeah, it's like the back
Oh.
side of that painting. Okay, and the reason I wanted to show you the back side is it's what you call a cradle. Okay, and a cradle is a lot like a canvas, except instead of having canvas stretched over it, it's got a piece of like cabinet grade, usually maple or some kind of wood panel that's actually mounted to it. Right now, you're looking at the back side of it. So this is what the back side looks like. All right. Now what I did is I took that cradle, and as you can see, it's made all out of wood. There's no canvas or anything there. And then the next step is I took some masking tape and I just taped the edge, okay, of that cradle. And the reason that I taped it was that I want to keep all the paint off of that edge. I just want to leave that wooden edge in the end, okay? And I didn't want to get a lot of paint all over it. So, after that was taped, then I actually applied gesso. And everybody know what gesso is? Anybody need to explain what that is?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, you need me to explain it, or yes, you.
It's a primer.
Yeah, it's basically it's a base.
Mhm.
Now on this particular cradle, I had done a previous kind of layout or sketch, and so it had kind of a dark, background, and I just covered it with gesso because I wasn't gonna work on that anymore. And
How much gesso did you put on there? That's a lot.
Quite a bit.
Are you supposed
Yeah.
to use that much?
Pardon?
Because I put just a light thing on
Yeah.
that. Am I supposed to use that much?
You don't have to, okay? But you see, the purpose of this is I wanted to put enough gesso down there to really create some underlying textures.
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what we call a texture map, okay? And so I laid that gesso on there real thick and, kind of brushed it out a little bit. And almost immediately, because I didn't want it to begin to dry, because as soon as it begins to set up and dry, I can't cut back through it. So almost immediately, I picked up this little tool, okay? Now, look real carefully at that. That's nothing more than the detail brush that I have used for many, many years, and I've just worn it down until there's nothing left, okay? And it's really just mainly the metal ferrule, with just a little bit of hair at the end. And I use that as a tool for cutting into paint, And so, you know, what I did with it is I then took it and I created a sketch, you know, just kind of a scribbly sketch of where I wanted to begin to put things. And you see, when I cut back through the gesso, that darker underlayment of color began to show through, right? Can you see that?
Yep.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. All right. And so, you know, I got a pretty good idea, and I was able to clearly see. Now, if you had put white gesso on a white prime canvas and then drawn into it, you're going to have a hard time seeing it. But if you have something dark underneath it, when you scratch through the white, you know, it comes out looking a lot like a drawing. You know, and you get, you know, these textures that you can begin to work with. Anyhow.
I have a question, Charles.
Uh-huh.
Are you using a very thick gesso, or because the ones that I've used, the ones that I'm using, it's a thinner, it's an easier flow gesso. It's not like a thick paste. So it looks like what you're using is a very thick gesso. Is that true?
Not particularly. No, I just lay a lot of it on there. Now, you know, maybe the gesso you have is made to be used real thin, and they put something in there to get it to lay flat and flow. I want the opposite, you know, and I just, you know, bought, I think this is it's a gesso by, I want to say that it was Liquitex.
Okay.
That's the one I
And,
got.
you know, and I just basically squirted a bunch out there on the board and then started spreading it around.
Wow.
And then I started cutting back through it, you know.
Okay.
Um,
That really makes a big difference. That's amazing.
but yeah, you know, you can do all kind of weird, wild, crazy things, you know, just with this.
Yeah.
And in fact, I showed it to Maria, and she kind of thought, "Well, are you done with it?" You know? And like, no,
Yeah.
it's just kind of the start. And so, so I, you know, after I got all of that down there, I let it dry. Okay, and that took about 2 hours.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for it to really dry thoroughly, because I didn't want to be working on a surface that was still movable. So I just let this dry completely, and then I took you know, some basically just black acrylic paint, and I kind of thinned it down, and I began to work it into the surface, you know, and create, you know, well, basically what I was trying to do, I was trying to get that dark down into all of those cut marks. Okay. And so then I would take a paper towel or a, you know, a cloth towel, and then rub, you know, while it was still wet, you know, rub it back so that I could leave those strong darks down underneath. Other areas where I knew I was going to be stumbling back over with color, you know, I added more and more paint, you know, just to make it more of a solid looking, you know, black. You know, because I know I'm going to come back and I want to save some of that black in there, but I'm going to be working over it with other layers of color. All right. So from there, you know, I let that dry fairly thoroughly, and then came back to it about a half hour later and started actually laying in color. And so, you know, I started back in the sky in the background, and, you know, basically just loosely laid in color. The color, you know, I didn't thin it very much. It was pretty much so almost just straight paint, you know, no water. And, you know, laid it down, tried to soften and blend some of the edges while it was still wet. and just, begin to get sort of the feel that I wanted of the light coming over that ridge. After I kind of got it to where I liked it, which is kind of where I took this photograph, then I went back in and I started working some of the lighter values in the sky and really kind of pushing the lights and stuff. And again, you can still see that, this has got a lot of texture in it, in the background. And, you can tell that it's a kind of a heavily textured surface. But went in, really kind of developed the sky, kind of got that to where I wanted it. And then from there, started working downward, on that ridge, putting some trees or the indication or suggestion of trees, in that middle ground area. And again, working, with mainly different mixtures of color, mainly greens. And let me blow that up a little bit. The thing I want to point out is, as I laid that in there, you see, I'm not trying to cover up everything. I'm trying to let some of that original color that was in that area, continue to come through. Okay? Because what I'm trying to create there is what we call an open or a broken paint passage. And it makes, it makes the, the color a lot richer and more interesting, because when you really start looking at the painting, you see a landscape at first, and then you start kind of getting into, all the different, layers of color and how it was applied. And again, this is kind of the foundation for some of the trees in the foreground. And again, it's mainly just the texture and a dark value right now. So there's that sky again, and still coming back in, trying to blend and soften things a little bit. And so here's where I took a brush, and again, this paint is fairly dry. I'm not adding water or anything to it. I'm just using the paint itself. And so I loaded up, the brush with a couple of different mixtures of paint. And rather than just taking the brush and, painting directly on it, I just turned the brush over to the side and kind of laid it down. And then just kind of scumbled over, that texture. And as you can sort of begin to see, I'll go to the next slide. By doing that, you see that paint comes off on those higher ridges, right? And it begins to create, this kind of broken pattern. And you can keep, like lay a color down, let that sit up and dry, go back in, work, one layer of color over another until you really build it up to, more or less look the way you want it. And then, after that, I went back in and I started actually laying in a dark on where the tree trunks would be. And that's kind of where I ended, was just, blocking those in. And then I just let the piece dry. And what I'll do from here is I'll come back in and I'll use some lighter values on some of these, the tips of the different branches, things like that. Work on some of the texture of the bark, in those trees. And then come in and put some, more defined, clearer shapes for leaves and things like that in the foreground, which should really help me pull this area, down here to the bottom, far forward of everything else. but that's kind of where
Hey,
we.
Charles,
Yeah,
you don't normally work with acrylics, though, do you?
I did for many years as an illustrator because it would dry fast, and you know, and I didn't have to wait for something to set up and dry for a long time. And I use it. I used it a lot at Benson for demonstrations and things like that. Again, for the same reason, and also, you know, that was kind of the paint that when we were working in the studio, we tended to work with, because a lot of people had trouble with breathing the fumes from the oil paint. And so, you know, so we primarily used acrylic in the studio. We did some live painting classes and things, but, you know, for the most part, you know, we used acrylic paint. And so, you know, the thing with acrylic is it's, out of all the mediums out there, it's probably one of the most versatile. You know, you can do so many different things with it. You know, whether you're painting representational paintings or you're doing abstracts, you know, you can create all sorts of textures and patterns and things, you know, with that acrylic paint. You can also use it, you know, more or less like a glue, and actually adhere, you know, other things to the painting, including leaves, shells, you know, actual three-dimensional objects. You know, I had one student who adhered a Starbucks cup that she had cut in half, and, you know, mounted it, you know, on her painting of an interior of a Starbucks. And you know, so you can be real creative with it, and it dries quickly. It's permanent. You know, there's not much that you can really do to it, you know, to really mess it up. And you know, if you do mess up an area, you know, you basically go back in and repaint it. You know,
You
so
know, excuse me, Charles, this little session here was so eye-opening. I would have never, I mean, I used the gesso, but I never used that much. And, you know, as a novice painter, and when I'm just looking at your painting, I would just assume that the texture that you've achieved there was just simply from brush strokes. But you know, it has I have a whole different perspective on it now. I see how, you know, putting that much gesso really makes that painting stand out. I mean, that to me, that was just amazing. I mean, I think it's fine like it is. I know you're going to do more to it, but it's so beautiful because of the different textures and different layers in there. And I would have just looked at that and thought it was achieved only by a paintbrush.
Mhm.
I agree, Charles. That's beautiful.
Well, you can, you know, if you're using oil paint, you know, you can build oil paint up one layer on top of another, and you can really get a lot of textural surfaces with oil. With acrylic, the issue, unless you buy what they call these heavy-bodied acrylics, you know, any color you put down there, when you put it down, it looks beautiful. You know, it's this nice paint stroke. And then you go away, 10 minutes later, you come back and it's just totally flattened out.
Right, exactly.
Because that's what acrylics are really designed to do, you know, is to, you know, even though you can brush it on really thick and it looks textural, when it dries, it all just, you know, sort of lines up and lays down real flat, because it was actually designed to do that initially. You know, when you're painting, you know, when you're painting your wall, or you're painting a vehicle or something like that, or a product of some sort, you don't want the brush strokes to show.
Right.
On
Exactly.
it. And so for industrial purposes, you know, when they designed acrylic, they actually designed it, you know, to go on kind of thick like that, and then to just all level out for you, and lay down flat. Now, you know, that's fine, you know, if you're, you know, painting a lawn chair or something like that. But if you're, you know, if you're doing a painting and you want those brushstrokes to be sort of part of the expression of the painting, then it presents a problem, because they're not going to be there, you know, when it all dries. But now with heavy acrylics, you know, they've got a heavy gel medium mixture in there,
Yeah.
so that now it will hold its shape, and the paint will stay the way that you put it down there. And so you can build up texture now with acrylic that way. And that's just, again, that's one more way of doing it. And or you can create what you call a texture map like this, and then work your color over it. Okay?
Wow.
So you got choices, you know. There's lots of different ways of getting there.
You know, for a novice painter, this is the type of information that's really helpful, because if you didn't tell me, I would never know. And if, you know, I would never know, you know. And so it makes these art classes just that much more better for me, because I would never know that. And if you don't, again, I can't say it enough, if you don't tell me, I don't know. And I wouldn't even know how to start looking for it, and or to figure it out unless someone tells us. And I think classes like this, for me, are so much more beneficial, because you just pulled back a layer of that onion and made art just that more appealing to me, at least trying to create art.
And here's the thing, you know, that you know, that I would encourage you to do, which is, you know, play with that gesso. You know, but before you ever start painting on a canvas, you know, do like a series of little thumbnails, really kind of figure out where you're going, and figure out where it is that you might want a more textural surface and area. And, you know, some flat areas, some texture areas, and particularly with like abstract pieces, things like that, you can really use that, you know, this idea of a texture map really effectively. You know, in the sense that you can really create a lot of relief in the same painting. And so, you know, think about that a little bit, you know, different ways that you can use it. And, you know, I mean, I think that just adds kind of like another, you know, another tool, you know, in your bag of tricks, you know, that you can play with. Okay?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
All right. So that's that one. Okay. And put that away so it's not in the way. All right. And then I'm kind of going to go through the process on the second one. Anybody have any more questions about that first piece? Anything you want to ask before we go?
No, but I was looking here online about the gesso.
Mhm.
Is some gesso for water painting, a different gesso for oil paint, or just the same one?
Well, originally, when
Just say acrylic also.
yeah, well, now gesso originally came as an oil-based paint. Okay, and gesso goes back to the time of the Renaissance, and what it is basically calcium carbonate, which is kind of this white, chalky looking powder. And it's ground up and it's put in a paint base. Now in, you know, oil, you know, they just added the oils and things and made the pigment, you know, and that's why it turned out white, because the calcium carbonate was white. But what the function of it is that it creates a barrier. It creates a barrier between the thing that you're painting on, your substrate, whether that's canvas, wood, whatever that is, and it creates a neutral barrier that oils and acids and things like that can't leach through and get down to that substrate. Because if the acids from your oil paint soak through and get into, let's say it's a piece of linen or even a piece of wood, those acids are going to eat that substrate up, see, and eventually undermine the painting. The painting's going to fall apart. So they put that neutral barrier down there to stop that from happening and to protect the thing that they were actually painting on. And so, people have been using gesso actually really since about the time of Egypt. It goes that far back. In fact, they have some of the wood and the plaster busts that they would make. They would coat them in gesso and then they would, paint them. And so it's been around for a long time. And even then, well, I'm not sure how the Egyptians made that gesso, because they didn't really use an oil-based paint. What they used all water-based paints, and so did the Chinese. But it was around about the Renaissance when they really, or just kind of, let's see, I think oil paint first started showing up really probably about maybe 200 or 300 years before the Renaissance. And so they learned how to mix pigments, with that oil, and that made it a lot more workable and dry slower, so that, they would have time to work with the paint. And so that's when they started making oil-based gesso. And that was really kind of in Europe, about the only kind of gesso you could get up until really around the 1940s or 50s, when they started making acrylic. And then they started actually making that as, again, a base coat to put the color over, because the color would adhere to it really well. But now you can, most of the gesso you're going to find in the stores is going to be water-based, and it's going to be acrylic. And you can put oil over that acrylic gesso. Now, within the last couple of years, they brought back oil-based gesso for oil painters. And, some people, want an oil-based gesso to put oil paint over. I don't know exactly what their reasoning is for that. It certainly dries a lot slower. And it's like, why do that, since you can use oil over that acrylic anyway? But,
So Charles,
really knows.
I have been told that priming the canvas could be done with acrylic paint, even if using oil afterwards. So am I understanding right that using gesso is not using acrylic paint as a primer is not as effective as using gesso?
No, it's not. Mm-mm.
Okay,
No.
That's for longevity or for anything?
Well, okay, again, gesso is not acrylic paint, okay? What gesso is it's an acrylic base, but again, what it has in it is basically a mineral. It's called calcium carbonate. And that calcium carbonate, is mixed in with the acrylic. And what it does is it creates this neutral barrier between your canvas and your oil paint. Now, acrylic is a plastic. And, just the straight acrylic with with maybe a pigment in it, or even without a pigment in it. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that it would not be susceptible to the acids in the oil paint. So longevity wise, it might be fine, you know, for right now, but long term, you know, it may not hold up because that acid could leach through that acrylic paint, you know, and into the wood or the canvas or whatever you're painting on. So I would be a little cautious about that.
I've
But
even
that's,
seen,
but that's if you're using oil, but if you're painting on top of it with acrylic, will it then last a little longer?
Well, yeah, if you're using acrylic paint on
Mhm.
top of an acrylic based gesso, yeah, you shouldn't really have any problem whatsoever.
No, I mean acrylic paint as the primer, and then the acrylic paint on top of it.
no, Gesso.
Yeah,
I
again,
thought that was you're going to use oil on top of it.
right. Yeah. But you see, again, you know, the purpose of priming your canvas with gesso
Mhm.
is, again, it sets up a barrier between the paint, because whatever pigments are in the paint itself,
Mhm.
you know, they may be, you know, damaging or detrimental to, you know, the canvas that you're painting on. Now, if you go out and you buy your canvases from Dick Blick or anybody else these days, they come already primed.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how they're white. Otherwise, they wouldn't be white because, you know, the cotton duct or the linen itself is really not white. If you look at the front and the back of it, it will look very different. So just about every canvas you buy in an art store is going to already be pre-primed for you. So you don't really need to go out and buy gesso, you know, just so that you can apply paint to it. The gesso would be used more for really kind of building up layers and doing a texture map, or, you know, getting more texture on the surface than the paint will provide itself. And, you know, gesso is a lot cheaper than paint, right? And so, you know, going over a canvas, you know, 8 or 10 times and really building up those layers of gesso is a lot less expensive than if you did it with your actual paint.
And you know, Charles, I also find because my prime base for my work is cardboard.
Mhm.
And so those pieces that I made with gesso and the ones I made without gesso, you can feel the difference in, you know, when you take, you know, the weight of the piece itself, and it feels much more sturdier with the gesso on it. And I think gesso is a hard sell for a lot of people because it doesn't click, you know, what difference it makes.
Mhm.
But if you use, and like Bernice said, I usually just put a thin layer, and I would do that too. But when I use canvas, I've been putting like 5 thin layers. I guess that equals to 2 real thick layers of
Mhm.
gesso, and it feels different. The paint adheres differently, and it looks so much, it looks better. And so that's the thing with gesso. You put it down first to make your work, to me, it looks better. It just looks different. It looks a whole lot better.
Yeah. Well, the colors are going to be brighter because, again, the paint is going to sit on top of the gesso and not sink in.
Yeah.
So, you know, you get, you know, really the full intensity of the pigment.
Mm-hmm.
If you're working on a porous surface like cardboard, where that paint is going to sink in,
Yes.
you know, over and over and over again until you get probably quite a few coats of paint on it, you know, then that really kind of pulls down the intensity, you know, of the color.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, again, you can save yourself a lot of pain, a lot of trouble by putting that gesso surface.
Gesso. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
You know,
true.
particularly if you're working on like a wood surface that's not been primed or something like that, you you'd be a lot better off putting, you know, a gesso primer over it before you tried to paint on it.
Mhm. It makes all the difference.
Yeah, and that's for oil or acrylic, either one, doesn't matter. Okay, you guys ready to move on?
Yes.
All right, so this is the second painting that I did, and I did this morning. Now, what this is, you know, you should see a beautiful red panel in front of you, right?
Yes.
Okay. What this is it's a piece of cabinet grade plywood.
Oh.
Okay, and Linda Randolph, evidently she had some of her cabinets redone, and you know, they had these scrap pieces left over, and they gave her a bunch of these scrap pieces, and you know, she didn't think that she was really going to use them, so she asked me if I would like them, and they're already primed on one side. You know, they're already sprayed out. They're like really smooth and really slick. And in fact, I experimented around. I tried painting on that slick surface, and I didn't really like it. It was too slick. Now I could probably take a piece of sandpaper or something, roughen that surface up, and it'd probably be fine. But instead, what I did is I, you know, basically primed out the back side of it. So, you know, I used gesso first, you know, and went over with a couple of coats of gesso. And then after that, then I didn't want to paint on a white surface. So I put down a couple of coats of this red over it. And why red? I don't really know why. I just had, you know, a bunch of red paint out one day and decided,
That's always
okay, I'll just use it as a background. And so I had a bunch of these panels, and I did about 10 or 15 of them like that. And that was fine, because it just, you know, it gives you something to start working on. And, you know, normally I would kind of prefer to work on a middle value neutral gray, but again, you know, this is just kind of experimenting, trying different things. So for this painting, I wanted to mainly try to use some different types of tools other than just a paintbrush. And so primarily I used palette knives on this, and you know, went through pretty much a traditional painting process, you know, starting with my darker values first, and then, you know, building toward the light. So, you know, I took my palette knife and, you know, more or less established, you know, where my horizon line was going to be sitting. And to do that, I didn't just use a color. I used a combination of black, this cobalt blue, and then some violet. And I didn't mix them together. I just kind of mixed them right there on the palette. I'd put something down and I'd work back into it. And again, you know, all I was really trying to do was establish sort of that horizon line, you know, where I was actually going to, you know, have that placed. From there, I took the end of a brush, and again, you know, I just cut through the paint, and I put some perspective lines down, you know, because I'm trying to create the feeling of a field that's receding. And so I actually just kind of drew through it, and leaving and cutting through and leaving that red showing through there. From there, you know, I continued working more color, you know, all the way down to the bottom. And again, you know, repeated the process, you know, went back through and, you know, just kind of cut into that paint so that, you know, I didn't have just a solid patch of color there. Again, it's kind of creating these, what we call open or broken paint passages. but it's a pretty effective tool at beginning to get a sense of getting your eye to pull back, you know, into the distance. Can any of you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So then I went back in with palette knife again, mixed up a couple of different greens, and laid in, you know, some big overall shapes, you know, with the green. Moving forward, I wanted to put something moving toward the foreground. And so again, you know, slightly change the temperature, you know, of those green mixtures, and, you know, put a larger object, you know, more toward the foreground. And then came back in with some lighter mixtures of color, mainly yellows, oranges, things like that, and began to actually do what we call scumble, you know, over that surface. And by this time, you know, all of that initial paint that I had put down was, you know, fairly dry. You know, the trees were, you know, pretty close to dry at that point. And so I could safely go back in and work over those layers of color and not move what was underneath. So I continued doing that, and, you know, building in more color on the bottom. And then again, you know, I went back with the palette knife and I started laying in a lighter value, you know, and a color for the sky. And again, you know, that's just all palette knife. You know, I'm not really using a brush to smooth anything out, you know, at this point. You know, I'm just laying it in. Now, this was done with a brush, the scumbling part, but this is all palette knife up here. And then I wanted to show you this. This is a little tool that I made. I just took a piece of wood. It was kind of thin stock. It was like less, probably about 1/4 inch thick. And I just took my saw and I just cut, you know, tried to keep it relatively even. But what it does, it created a comb, right, that I could scratch back through, you know, some of these areas. And it's a pretty effective tool at being able to cut through that paint, you know, as long as it's wet. And I'm going to play with that some more. And I had actually made that before I started doing these because I was wanting to play with something like that. And so there's a closer look, you know, at the painting at that stage. And again, you know, I just used that wooden tool to kind of cut back through and scrape down, you know, to the original surface of that red. Okay. You know, that and a metal, kind of a rounded metal palette knife. Yeah, there you go. So came back in, you know, after I had my sky laid in, came back in and, you know, started laying in some other colors and developing the sky a little bit. And, you know, just kind of following those perspective lines, you know, trying to get my clouds and things to move backward in space. Again, you know, larger objects here to the top of the canvas, they get smaller, you know, as they head toward the horizon line. And as you can see, you know, all of the greens and things had pretty much so dried. And I was able to come back in with a fairly large brush and some lighter values and just begin to scumble in over the top of beginning to give them the feeling of having a little more dimension. And, you know, as I was doing that, I was also kind of working down here in the field as well. You know, trying to begin to define, you know, the shape of that cast shadow from that tree. And so that's kind of more or less where I stopped.
Charles, this is Bob. I
Yeah,
have a question, sir.
yeah.
When you just began to start this, did you know where you were going, or this just evolved?
No, I had a pretty good idea where I was going to go.
Okay. Just curious.
Yeah, I had a composition in mind. So, now I didn't know, exactly where I was going to place every cloud and everything else at that point.
Right.
And again, this is, I think this painting took me maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours to do. Yeah.
So evolution played a big part.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I mean, and the thing is, on things like this, I would kind of consider this really just like a quick study, and you're just playing with the composition and color and things. And, I can always come back now that I've more or less got this idea submitted down. I could always go back and do a more finished painting of it.
What size is it?
It's pretty small. It's probably like 9 by 12. So here, I'll show you. All right. Everybody see me?
Yes.
See, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's just on a piece of, cabinet grade plywood. That was painted on. So, and, things like this are really, really good. Just for like experimenting on, making studies, things like that. I mean, it's, the way it turned out, I'm fairly happy with it. And it made a nice little painting, all by itself. But, I wouldn't really call it a finished piece of work. But let's see, go back to the share part here. But the thing I kind of like most about this is, just working with kind of scratching in that underlying kind of perspective. And then even up here in the sky, it's fairly subtle. But it really kind of works to help draw your eye back, and kind of pull you back into the distance and gives your eye something to follow, going back to, back to that back horizon line. So, anybody got any questions about that? Any comments? Anything they want to?
I have a comment, but not necessarily about that. Can you show the finished picture of that first painting again? What I learned from that first painting is I'm doing too much work. It's like I could do just some scribbles, and get the same feel without trying to get, So may I see the
Sure.
the final picture of that first painting?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
She says she's doing too much
I'm
work.
doing too much work.
Yeah, I'm trying to get every leaf, every line, and he just scribbled it.
So let me gonna blow that up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Going.
So you're talking about like in this
In
area,
those
right?
areas like that, yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's there's always more than one way to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And experimenting around, playing with things, trying to figure out how you're going to kind of achieve some of those surfaces and textures. That's time well spent. And you're going to come up with your own unique and individual ways of doing stuff like that. So You know, that's the whole purpose of playing with all of this stuff.
Okay.
That was the best thing yet. I'm working too hard. I love that, Bernice.
Yeah.
Supposed to be fun, not work, right?
That's right. That's
Okay,
right.
I'm playing too hard.
Yeah.
I need to pull back a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess a good way of saying that is, yeah, don't make your playtime hard work. Okay.
Okay.
And the thing is, depending on the style and the approach, you know, that you want to take to creating a piece of art, you know, maybe you want like a really tight photographic representational look, you know, to your work. In that case, well, okay, a lot of this isn't really going to apply to you as much. But, you know, if you're just wanting to experiment and kind of play with color and texture and things like that, you know, again, this is just kind of giving you ideas. And, you know, what I did was something that looked somewhat representational. The idea is it looked like a landscape. You don't have to end up with something that looks like a landscape, you know, or looks like anything really. You know, some really kind of fun abstract paintings and things are full of textures and interesting surfaces and transparency and opacity. And it just makes really, really interesting paintings. So there's all kinds of possibilities out there.
Charles, I really learned a lot from this class.
I'm
I
glad.
take notes that have a whole lot of them.
Well,
Mm,
you know, it's, you know, learning technique and different, you know, just different little experimental ways of working are always valuable because, again, you know, you kind of tuck those away in your toolbox and it gives you the ability to go back and solve problems in more than one way. And so, you know, it's worthwhile, you know, for me to do things like that. And I'm glad that lady had asked and or made the comment about me evidently ignoring acrylic for too long. So, and that's fine. That's fine. You know, I mean, I'm here, you know, it's if you want to, you know, if you want to know something or if you want some kind of demo on a particular medium or something like that, just let me know. You know, I think, you know, John, you know, kept, you know, working with watercolor and stuff. And so there for a while, you know, showing a lot of watercolor stuff, again, because a lot of you were using, you know, water media. And, you know, watercolor is a great medium to work with. It's not the one that I normally go to, you know, it's not the one that, you know, I think I'm best at, but, you know, again, you know, it's paint, it's brushes, and it's drawing and color and composition. And, you know, and it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile kind of experimenting and working with a lot of different medium and, you know, always trying to find out, you know, how things work and, you know, trying to find new materials and things to work with. So, you know, you never quite know what you're going to find out there. And, you know, having a little bit of range and versatility and confidence about working with these different medias can be really helpful to you, you know, long term. So, let's see. Well, I got 10:56, you know. Anybody got anything that they want to talk about before we go away?
Well, I enjoyed again the information that we got out of this class because as a professional artist, you've forgotten just those basic things that come natural to you, which is like amazing to us. I mean, it's just eye-opening. And so, you know, like for example, I assume that everybody knows how to take the skin off a tomato. I've been doing it for 40, 50 years. And when someone says they don't know how to do something, it's like, wow, really? And so you giving us this information, and I'm glad I mentioned acrylics, because it changes everything. It takes what I'm interested in doing to a whole different level.
Mhm.
It's just amazing to me. But,
Okay.
just like a cat, it doesn't take much to entertain me, I tell you.
Well, okay. All right. Yeah.
Charles,
Well, yes.
are you on YouTube also? Are you still on YouTube? Because that's where I first started watching you.
Right. Yeah, I am. They're uploading these classes to YouTube.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's usually about I think it takes about 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, from when this class is actually held to by the time that it's up there and available on YouTube, it's about 2-3 weeks.
Okay.
Okay. But
Okay.
the great thing about having them on YouTube, if there was a discussion or something that you remembered that you want to go back and check out, you can always go back,
Yes.
look at it and kind of replay that. So yeah, we're out there in the universe forever now. So, all right. Anybody got anything they want to talk about? If not, come on, one.
Well, I just got back in town. I've been gone since the 14th of October.
Oh,
So I've missed quite a bit of stuff. So I got a lot of catching up to do.
okay. Can we ask where you went?
I went home to Buffalo, visit my family.
Okay, Buffalo, New York.
Yes, Buffalo, New York. Yes. I went there also. My brother passed, and we had his funeral there. So that's why I was gone so long.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear about your brother.
Thank you.
Yeah, but how is Buffalo doing as a general town, stuff like that? What's going,
The COVID is not as strong in Buffalo as it is other areas, which I found out when I got there. But people were really wearing their masks, keeping their distances, and just doing what you should be doing. And I was really surprised.
Yeah.
I know when I first got there, they told me I had to go into a 14-day quarantine. And of course I did. But I was around mostly my family, but I did it for 14 days. They text you every day, ask you how you're feeling. And as long as you were feeling good, everything was okay. So the 14th day, they said I can go out and do what I want to do. But I was doing that anyway, because I know I was okay when I got there. And I'm okay now. No problems, nothing. So.
But the new thing is 7 days, which I like.
Oh, is it 7 days?
Yeah. Well,
maybe 10.
Yeah, I think different states are requiring different things. They're not all uniform, but yeah, it's I follow, Maria and I both kind of follow this whole COVID thing on a day-to-day basis. And it's really interesting, when they start showing the maps. I think it's from the CDC, which are really like county by county. And when you look at that map, for whatever reason, Georgia seems to be one of those places that isn't totally lit up in red. There are areas in Georgia, but for the most part, it's like all of the state of Alabama and South Carolina and Florida and all around us is like bright red. And we tend to have like these patches. So evidently,
it looks like the small towns in Georgia do worse for some reason.
Yeah, and that seems to be the case, I think, across the country right now. Is that I think a lot of the larger metropolitan areas, people are being more cautious. They're wearing masks. They're trying to do what's recommended. I think you get out into a lot of these small rural communities and things like that, and I think a lot of people are still running around and kind of think that wearing a mask is silly or something. And unfortunately, it
Have
doesn't.
you seen anything about Dawson, Georgia?
Not specifically, no, I haven't.
Well, it's one of the worst ones in the state right now, and that's the place where I'm from. I
Yeah.
won't even go there.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
I want Georgia's reporting everything.
Yeah, now Dawson is in like the south part.
Yeah, between Albany and Columbus.
Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
Huh. Okay. Well, yeah, I'm kind of sad to hear that. You know, it's you know, this is one of those things where it's a common sense thing. You know, it's like I think we all just need to kind of do what we can do. You know, stay home, try to keep social distancing, keep wearing a mask if you have to go out. You know, wash your hands. You know, I mean, you know, none of that stuff is difficult to do.
No.
It may be inconvenient, you know, but hey, better inconvenient than in the hospital on a respirator. So
That's right.
yeah.
Or a lot of these people have no family members who have died from this disease.
Mhm.
And they don't want to wear the mask, like you say, because it's something that you're going against their rights. And the thing is that where's the right of your mother or your sister or your father or your grandmother who's in the hospital dying, and you can't even go in there and be with them
Right.
when their life is gone, you know? So think about those things.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, a lot of people, you know, the one thing you can say about human beings, you know, a lot of people don't think much, you know, much past today, you know.
Yeah. Mhm.
And they don't really think about the consequences of their actions. You know,
Absolutely.
and they're just, you know, they're just going through their life doing what they would normally do.
Mhm.
Now, you know, you did mention, you know, a lot of this has gotten really politicized,
Mm.
you know, and it's
Yeah.
kind of like, you know, if you wear a mask, you're on one side. If you don't wear a mask, you're on another.
Isn't
And
that crazy?
it is. And, you know, it's unfortunate, you know, that that's happened. Now, I guess the question is going forward, you know, how do we kind of untangle that ball of yarn
Mm.
and just get people to do what they need to do so that, you know, they can be healthy and survive. So,
Yeah.
But
you
the
know,
vaccine is on the way, so.
yes, they say that it is, you know, and everybody's crossing their fingers and hoping that that is the case and that they can get it distributed and, you know,
Up to now, I wouldn't even take a flu vaccine because I knew it was for the flu that had passed.
mhm.
It's not for the current flu. It's for protection against the flu that they already know about. But this year, I'm taking. You know,
Yeah, this year you're going to take,
Yeah.
I've already taken the flu shot. I'm just waiting for the corona.
You
yeah.
haven't taken it yet?
Hmm?
You haven't taken the flu shot yet?
Oh no, I have. I say
Okay.
in previous years I would not take it because it always seems like the flu shot is really to protect against the flu that already is. If there's a new flu, the flu shot did not seem to protect against that. So I never took it. But not never. I rarely took it. But this year I say I'm not taking any chances with anything.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, I would encourage you, and you know, again, you know, this comes down, you got to make a personal choice, and I understand, you know, people's maybe reluctance, you know, to jump right up there and get, you know, a vaccination for this stuff because it was developed so quickly, but
Yeah.
you know, under the circumstances, you know, I mean, you just got to make a choice, you know, whether you're willing to take that risk or not. And, you know, for me, you know, when they have it available and when they offer it, you know, I'll take it. You know, yeah.
You know, a lot of the articles I've read talked about how this shot is going to be given in stages. The first stage is supposed to be for a certain amount of time, and then after that, another shot is supposed to be given.
Right.
So there's a lot of different information out there, which one is true, which one isn't. It's becoming complicated.
Yeah. Well, and that's with that one particular vaccine that you have to, it's a 2-stage vaccine.
Okay.
Now there was another company who came out with, actually now I think they've got 4 different vaccines that they've said that are somewhere in the range of about 90% effective.
Okay.
And there was one that was being developed at Oxford that can be distributed, and it doesn't have to be refrigerated, and it's not a 2-stage, it's a 1-stage thing. So, yeah, so who knows, which one they're going to settle on, and they may actually have multiple vaccines out there, and they may have to have them just so that they can get enough production and get it distributed, to people quickly. So, we'll see what happens with that. But not all the vaccines are the same,
Right.
I mean, they took different approaches to developing them, and the one that was developed first is, like you said, it's a 2-stage, and it's problematic because it can really only be distributed in countries or places where they have the ability to refrigerate it.
Right.
And we're not talking about in your refrigerator. We're talking about
special refrigeration.
Yeah, it's like a minus 60 degrees or something like that. It's got to be kept at. That's
absolute zero.
Yeah. So that's like way below zero.
Absolute zero.
Yeah. So you might be able to distribute it, like in Alaska in midwinter, and not have to worry about it too much. But summertime in the middle of Georgia, that's who knows how they're going to do that. But yeah, it will be, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens between now and the end of the year. And, hopefully we'll hear more about getting more vaccines coming online. And as we do, maybe there's something out there that they can make quickly and distribute quickly and get to people, in a timely manner. Because, this is kind of gone on way too long here. So,
way too long. Yes.
Yeah. So
I thought when we left in March, we were going to come back in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that didn't happen, did it?
And no. Here we are.
Here we are. I mean, I was talking to Maria. It's like this year has gone by so incredibly fast. If you really look back at it, it's just like, what happened? But here we are. And
did we learn any lessons? Have we learned anything from this experience?
Well, I hope that we have.
I've learned lots of patience and being able to be calm about some things that had me irritated and upset. So I'm adjusting, because sometimes I want to go outside and don't have my mask on and like, oh my God, I forgot my mask. It's like you're forgetting your keys or your cell phone. That mask has to be with you all the time.
But you can go out in your own environment without your mask.
Well, yeah,
being out walking around in the air itself is not hazardous. It's being in enclosed spaces with lots of people.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of hoping that the one thing that maybe we as a nation might learn is, we really need to pay attention about being prepared for things like this. And unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of preparedness, when this all began. And
well, I don't want to get political, so I'm not going to say a whole lot about that.
Right.
But I understand that it was prepared, but it was like the second administration did not really want to do what the previous administration had said, had put in place.
Yeah, well,
That's true.
There had been Yes, once upon a time, actually, this country was very prepared for all kinds of things like that.
Mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm.
Yeah, and you know, again, you know, it comes down to political will and
Exactly.
choices, and so hopefully, you know, hopefully this is one of those things that they'll learn not to let fall through the cracks.
Yeah, we'll
So
have some common sense people
yeah, well, we hope
in there now.
so.
Hopefully, yeah.
Well,
We'll see what
Like my
happens.
Yeah.
like my mother used to say, if common sense was common, more people would have it. So
Right.
Mhm.
it's
Anyway.
one of the things that I think I've always known, and I hate to say it, is that as a species, we're very selfish. You know, it's all about me. And so I think that was probably the biggest challenge with people not listening to the scientists and
Mhm.
doing what they say.
Absolutely.
Because you're infringing on my rights. I have the right to do this.
Yeah.
Yes, you do, but we all have the right to live. And if we work together collectively, we can make this, you know, make it through it and change it.
Absolutely.
You know, it's all about science. And for those folks who don't believe in science, I want them to tell me one thing in this world that science doesn't affect.
Mm.
You know, the
Mhm.
paint that we paint with was developed by science. The house
Right.
that you live in is all about science.
Mhm.
And so that's just my opinion.
That's the common sense of it, you know. So
Yes, it
let's get it
is.
together. Get it together, America. It's time.
Right, right.
I ditto all that.
Well,
Yes.
well, you know, all I can say, and you know, this is a somewhat humorous end to this, is that, you know, they have developed an award, you know, for that. It's called the Darwin Award.
Mm.
Mhm.
Is everybody familiar with what that is?
Yes. Yes.
As
Yeah.
in Charles,
Pardon?
as in Charles Darwin.
Yes.
No. Well, yes, Charles Darwin. Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. You know, basically, you know, they now give the Darwin Award to, you know, the human on the planet who, you know, dies in the most, you know, senseless way, you know, without leaving offspring, you know, and it's, but, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people who just make bad choices out there. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of bad choices made, you know, through this whole thing. So hopefully, you know, we're learning, and, you know, people are beginning to take this more seriously. And, and, you know, we can come out of this, okay. So anyway.
Hopefully.
This is a different subject, I know, but
Okay.
before we go, I took a picture while I was out yesterday of some trees,
Mhm.
and I wanted to know if I'm kind of painting from the picture, and I take some of the trees out, do I really change the picture too much?
You can never change the picture too much.
Okay, just because I want to take, as I said, as I said, lady, I don't want to work too hard. I want to take some of the trees out.
Well, okay. I guess it comes down to the question of, all right, are you trying to copy the picture faithfully, or are you just using it as a source of inspiration or reference? You know,
reference.
Right. So, and if that's the case, then you can change the trees any way you want. You can move them. You can have more of them, less of them. You know, make them further away or closer to you. You know, I mean, again, you know, it's just a piece of reference. You know,
Okay.
you don't have to follow it faithfully. Okay.
Okay.
So, and you know, if you're like most people in my classes, you know, when they try to do something like that, they'll usually have 8 or 10 different pieces of reference, you know, all at different times of day and different lighting and everything else, and they'll create what we call a Frankenstein.
Frankenstein?
They put it together to make a picture.
That's right.
All the pieces together, yeah.
Yeah, but they don't really fit together well, you know. And you know, believe me, I've seen lots and lots of people do that, and you know, it sometimes it creates, you know, a lot of problems for yourself. So, you know, the only thing I'd say about, you know, reference is, you know, be particularly aware of the direction of the light
Okay.
in the reference. And, you know, if you're going to use several pieces of reference, make sure that the lighting is kind of consistent. Okay.
Okay.
Rather than having light coming from the left on one, on the right from the other, you know, from behind on another one, because, you know, then it begins to feel, you know, like something's not quite right about that image. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, just keep an eye on that. All right. Let's go to lunch.
All right.
Okay. All right.
See
And
you later.
do me a favor, if you haven't sent anything in, you know, since we're talking about painting today, try to keep it in the realm of painting if you can. But if you have other things that you want to share, that's fine. You know, just send it in, and I'll try to download it, and we'll see you at 2. Okay.
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 Thank you.
All right.
Thank
All
you.
right. All
Guys,
right.
take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good lunch.
Yeah.